Sci-fi, horror, fantasy, absurdism in the extreme. It's all available here in the Tales from the Omni Vault book series. Check the description for Amazon links so you can get your copies and start reading today. Thank you all, and now, on to the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni Viewer. And even though the two bits of the news I'm about to cover in this video are very different from each other, I figured that they're each brief enough that I may as well just mash them together into one video. So first of all, something for the monsterverse. Do you remember how we learned that there was supposed to be a sequence in Godzilla 2014 where classic Godzilla veteran and popular Japanese actor Akira Takarada was supposed to make a brief cameo, and yet it was not in the actual final cut of the movie and never made its way onto the DVD, the Blu-ray, or later the 4K Ultra release? People were starting to wonder if we'd ever get to see it. Well, now we can. The scene has actually been made available online by Toho Kingdom, and I will try to remember to put a link to it in the description for you. And apparently, this is in anticipation of it being included as a special feature on the upcoming 5-film Monsterverse release. Now, I have watched the scene a couple times at this point. My overall thoughts would be that I can kind of understand why it got cut because it doesn't really add anything to the plot. But then again, adding to the plot isn't really the point of the scene. The scene is to give us that Akira Takarada cameo, which would have been something good for the fans. It's a very brief thing, I realize, and it's not like it's a mind-blowing moment. It's not even really treated like a big meta moment. Unless you know who Akira Takarada is and you're going to instantly recognize him, you would otherwise just look at it as, oh, it's just a scene of Fort Brody arriving in Japan. But you know, it's only 24 seconds long. I really can't think of a reason why it couldn't have been in the movie, because it's not going to take up that much time, all things considered. And it would have been a nice little treat for the fans, like I keep saying. Well, it may not have been available for the last 10 years, but it is finally available now. So if you want to watch it and see what all the fuss was about, now you can. Like I said, I'll try to include a link down below, but I'm guessing a lot of you guys are at least familiar with Toho Kingdom, so it might not be that hard to find if I forget, but there should be a link down there. Next up, something regarding a different kind of monster. A trailer was just released for the upcoming remake of Nosferatu, which will be releasing this December. And I gotta say, it looks really intense. Now, inevitably, if you look up this trailer on YouTube, you'll be able to scroll down to the comments section, and no matter what channel you're finding it on, you're gonna see all kinds of SpongeBob references in the comments. And I get it. That is where a lot of people were first introduced to Nosferatu as a concept because of that weird little joke at the end of the hash-slinging slasher episode. But look, again, I don't want to act like I don't understand, but Nosferatu's got such a greater legacy than that. Obviously, you have the original silent film, which is a cinematic classic, even though it's also a work of utter blatant plagiarism. There's just no getting around that. It is Dracula with a slightly different coat of paint because they couldn't get the rights to make Dracula. But even despite that, somehow it manages to succeed as its own thing, with some really iconic performances. Well, scratch that. There's really only one iconic performance everybody remembers from that movie, which is Max Schreck as Count Orlok. But hey, that makes it worth it. It's such a great performance, in fact, that it sparked an urban legend that Max Schreck was a real-life vampire, not an actor, and that the death of Count Orlok at the end of the movie was not a special effect, but a real, actual vampire death caught on film. Like I said, urban legend. But it did inspire the movie Shadow of the Vampire in the 90s, which is an interesting way of bringing forward that legacy and addressing that particular aspect of it. Then, of course, you have Werner Herzog's remake from the 1970s that curiously used the Dracula names but switched around who was who in some cases, which has a nice dreamlike atmosphere to it, and certainly has some great gothic imagery, though I still don't know if it quite reaches the same level as that original silent version. Then there's Nosferatu in Venice, which is kind of the black sheep of the series, and not just because of what happens on screen. It's also because apparently, if you read the behind the scenes, Klaus Kinski was acting like a depraved lunatic the whole time. But I can't really go into greater detail about that because this is a family-friendly channel. So anyway, there's this whole great legacy of Nosferatu, and this movie seems to be reveling in that fact. The trailer makes it very clear that the subject is being taken very seriously. You would think that 100 and some odd years down the line, Nosferatu would be considered quaint, that vampires in general wouldn't necessarily be considered that scary anymore. I mean, after everything they've been through, where they went from being these scary undead creatures to gradually being romanticized by the likes of Dark Shadows and different interpretations of Dracula, until finally becoming the sparkly pretty boys of the Twilight series, that vampires would have lost their edge. Sure, you still get some cool vampire action stuff over in the manga and anime realm, but they're really not scary anymore, right? Well, this Nosferatu remake looks to be proving the idea that vampires can still be scary. It looks like it is going to be one heck of a creepy, atmospheric, oppressive, intense horror movie where you have a whole bunch of darkness, a bunch of creepy imagery. There are some great shots in there, like just the shot of Orlok's hand casting a shadow over the city. That right there, that is a great shot. Great vampire imagery right there. Curiously, they do not show what Orlok is going to look like yet. We get glimpses, but nothing solid, which could mean they're going to go with something totally unexpected. Or maybe they found some way to take that original look, which is certainly an exaggerated appearance, and find a way to sort of recontextualize it for the modern day. But whatever the case, the trailer's main purpose is to build up a sense of foreboding. The repeated mantra is that he is coming. And that the more they do that, the more a sense of dread is built up, where you really get the sense that this Nosferatu, this version of Count Orlok, is something that should be feared. And I'm actually looking forward to that. Like, I know that there was The Last Voyage of the Demeter that was also trying to be a more intense take on vampire horror by adapting that one part of Dracula into a feature-length film. But then again, I don't know, it just kind of looked like it was going to be Alien, but in Victorian times on a boat. And you already kind of know how it's going to turn out because it's based on one section of a much longer story. A section that sometimes isn't even fully depicted in most adaptations. So, yeah, there couldn't be that much tension if you know that Dracula's gonna make it all the way to England by the end. But with this version of Nosferatu, especially considering who's behind it, I'm not sure how it's gonna play out. I mean, being a remake, it could still go in the direction of staying true to the original story and, you know, with it being a Dracula, not Dracula kind of story. The vampire will likely die at the end, but then you think back and you remember, well, Werner Herzog had a little bit of a twist where, like, the vampire dies, but evil isn't 100% defeated. That he found a way to sort of still attain a bit of a victory. So who knows what's going to happen with this one. I just know it looks like a nice return to good old-fashioned intense gothic horror, and I'm curious to see how it plays out. So those are the big news items of the day. One of them involving kaiju, one of them involving monsters a bit smaller in scale. But still, I'm a fan of both, so I think this was a pretty productive day all around. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.